Hey there, BookTube. Noah. I'm here to get into another one of my shelves. This is another shelf that sits out in the living room, so these are things that, are conversation starters. These are things that I really enjoy, like talking about, enjoy looking through, and basically just, it's my favorite shelf. My shelf of favorites is what it is. Favorites as far as fiction, but some art, all kinds of it's all whatever stuff. But my favorites that I leave out here in the living room for anybody to see and to maybe pique their interest. You'll see some of that, and let's get to it. So up on top shelf, all the whole top shelf is William Blake. Now I have a lot of William Blake, as you can see. We'll just go through a little bit of it. I'm not going to pull it all down, but just parts of it I'm going to pull down. I'm going to do my best not to put my back to the camera so much. This is Milton's Paradise Lost, illustrated by William Blake, the Folio Society. This is a wonderful edition. Can go through it if anybody has an interest. Jerusalem, Emanation of the Giant Albion, the most epic work by William Blake. His most epic book that he did, and this is the Princeton University Press edition of Jerusalem. Princeton University Press put out an edition of every one of his books that he did in his life, his illuminated works, and they're awesome. They're the highest quality. So I got Jerusalem. Hopefully we'll get the others at some point. This is the complete graphic works of William Blake. William Blake was more than just an artist, and he was more than just an author. He was a master of the English language, and also a master of art, and developed his own style of artwork. This has all of his books, all of the books that he illuminated for other people, all of his artwork that he did, not in glorious facsimile. There's no color prints in here, but there is 2 copies of Jerusalem. There is the grave. Thomas Gray, I believe, is the author that did the grave, and he illustrated and put illustrations to that work for him. It's commissioned work. He did a lot of commissioned work in his life, and it has all of his paintings that we have in there. All of his, even just down to notebooks and things that he wrote. The 4 Zoas, a work that he was doing most of his life, that never got published, is in there. So you can take a look. Here's another very, very poorly, a poor facsimile of William Blake's Jerusalem, a black and white one. Now there's only 6 copies of Jerusalem that we have. There's only six copies of that work that are extant, and so they differ in very minute ways. There's only 1 full color copy, so the full color copy is what is in that Princeton University Press. William Blake, this is a collection of what William Blake's work is in the Tate Gallery, and there's a lot of color facsimiles of those works in here, and just a good representation of Blake, that from the book of Job, and he did the entire book of Job. This is from Milton, so there's a wide variety of work in the Tate Gallery in London. And then I have William Blake at the Huntington Library. Huntington Library has a huge collection of William Blake. William Vaughn's book of William Blake, the drawings of William Blake. Now this is just pencil drawings. All the pencil drawings of William Blake that we have. Some have some have some words with them, some don't. There's some studies of form. You can see some arms and feet there that he was drawing out. Some bodies, in profile, bodies facing away from you. These kind of things. Just all the pencil drawings from William Blake that we have. Let Me Be Los. This is exploring the connection between William Blake and James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake. Now, Finnegan's Wake is a very complicated work, and Joyce used a lot of William Blake's mythology in his telling of that story, in conjunction with the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So that's an exploration of Finnegan's Wake. It has found its way up there because it has a lot to do with William Blake. A facsimile reproduction of William Blake's Book of Job. It has all the text of the Book of Job there, and then we have William Blake's book that he put together with pictures and words of the Book of Job. It is an amazing work to get into if you have never and really want to kind of get a mystical take on the Book of Job. William Blake is the way to go. At the end of Blake's life, he was working on the Divine Comedy by Dante, and this has all of the text of all the text of the Divine Comedy, but with William Blake's drawings. Now, a lot of these are unfinished. A lot of them are unfinished because he was working on it, like I said, at the very end of his life. He was actually working on it at his death. But there is some amazing work in here. And I'm just trying to find something specific, just because it's really cool. I don't know if I'm gonna find it, but a lot of color. These were all watercolors that he had done, and there's some of the illustration. Whatever. If you want to go through it, we can go through it. We have David Binman is a scholar on William Blake. He did Blake as an artist. This is a work that explores William Blake's artistry and goes through a lot of his biography and things like that. I got Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, illustrated by William Blake. He did a series of illustrations for that work. William Blake Poetical Sketches. Now this is early, very early poems written by William Blake. Very, very, very cool. Blake the Mystic Genius. This is a work that goes through a couple of Milton's works that William Blake had done illustrations for, not Paradise Lost. So there's a lot of color watercolors, and some just beautiful, beautiful stuff in there. And a lot of text of the philosophy that William Blake not just embraced, but for in a lot of ways created. So William Blake did 2 books, Milton, where he created a story where Milton is called back from the afterlife to answer for what Blake saw as faults in his theology. Now, he loved Milton. He's not critical of Milton in a way of trying to nail him or something like that. He just thought that Milton was an unknowing party to Satan. And if you read Milton's Paradise Lost, you'll see, especially in conjunction with Milton there, you'll see that that Milton really did embrace, was more interested in Satan's story than he was the story of the redemption of man. This is the first commentary Joseph Wicksteed did, the first commentary on Jerusalem that we have. Goes through all of Jerusalem is 100 plates long, and he goes through it plate by plate, breaking down the illustration, breaking down some of the themes and some of the things that Blake touches on. It's kind of a complicated work. If you don't know Blake's mythology, things are very complicated when you go toward Blake. But once you get a handle of what his own mythology was, he's not that complicated, and it's always a delight all the way through. Blake and the Bible is a critical work by Christopher Rowland. He's a professor of theology at at Yale University. He gave these talks. I don't think he teaches at Yale. I think he was called in to do a series of talks on William Blake. And you can find them on YouTube. I highly recommend it. It's really, really interesting stuff. It's like three different days, an hour apiece. And so he took those talks and he wrote it into a book, Blake and the Bible. It's really, really interesting. Up here I have small copies of The Song of Innocence and the Songs of Experience. This is Blake's first big illuminated work where he lays out his mythology succinctly. But Blake was a student of the Bible, so there's biblical themes run throughout. The Pink Ring manuscript, this is a manuscript that was found after Blake's death, a private notebook where he wrote down a lot of poems and a lot of ideas. You're going to find some stuff in there that's part of just popular culture now. Things like seeing the universe in a grain of sand and beholding eternity in 1 hour. That kind of thing, that comes from the Pink Ring manuscript. I have a work down here on the bottom. I'm not going to pull it out. This is David Erdman's The Illuminated Blake. It is a huge work. It's about this wide. It's a normal size tall, but it's about this wide, folio size maybe. And it just has a huge amount of illustration. It sits up there because I don't have any use to reference that with the complete graphic works that I have up there now. But I will touch on it if I need to. David Erdman is a Blakean scholar, and he actually puts together the complete poetry and prose of William Blake. This is what you want. This is every written word that William Blake ever wrote in poetry and prose. Not letters, but there is a lot of letters in here as well, and with notes, annotations, and things to help you work into the text. This is what you want. David Erdman's complete poetry and prose of William Blake. To just read the words. Now you're gonna lose a lot by just reading the words. I got E.P. Thompson's Witness Against the Beast, Michael Davis, William Blake, A New Kind of Man, Gilchrist's biography, The Life of William Blake. Morton Paley is another Blakean scholar. This is Energy and the Imagination by Morton Paley. It's a really great work to get an idea, to work into Blake's mythology. Another copy, just text, written out very, very easy to read, of William Blake's The Emanation of the Jerusalem, The Emanation of the Giant Albion. R.L. Grimes is actually a William Blake and Flannery O'Connor scholar. So William Blake wrote The Divine Imagination. This, I believe, is his dissertation. So I'm not sure about that. Don't hold me to it. But Joanne Whitby, William Blake's epic Imagination Unbound. So imagination was God to Blake. Imagination was the whole of God to William Blake. Imagination is explicitly stated as the divine body by William Blake. So our imaginations, guys, that is God. That is the whole of God. And anything that we can imagine, we have the power to give life to. So, watch what you think. Next shelf, I have all my Thomas Pynchon, so I'm just going to go down the line. V, his first published novel. Slow Learner, this is a collection of short stories that he wrote before he published his first books. This is a great work to see what early Thomas Pynchon was like, where his head was, and you get a lot of the same themes that you find in Pynchon's work. Paranoia, conspiracies, and entropy, some scientific stuff. He was just a genius. So you get all that. Gravity's Rainbow. I love this edition. I love the cover there of Gravity's Rainbow. You know, the schematic for the V2 rocket that is actually the first line in Gravity's Rainbow. Vineland. Now this is a very accessible work, and what I usually will recommend to start off with if you're starting off with Pynchon. Vineland. Thomas Pynchon, Mason, and Dixon have not cracked that one. Inherent Vice. This is actually a recent movie that was made by one of my favorite movie makers, Paul Thomas Anderson. So there's the best for me right there. You know, one of my favorite movie makers of all time, adapting one of my favorite authors of all time. So I recommend Inherent Vice. It's accessible as well on the level of Vineland. And for you guys who aren't down for getting into Thomas Pynchon as a period piece, older folks can relate to Inherent Vice and Vineland because it's about 60s and 70s. But Bleeding Edge actually takes place at the end of the 1990s, coming up to 2001, early 2000s. And I highly recommend Bleeding Edge. It is wonderful. That's his latest book. I have some critical works. This is Sign and Symptoms, Thomas Pynchon and the Contemporary World. And then that's it for Pynchon that sits out on my shelf. Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This is one of my favorite works ever. 100 Years of Solitude. If you haven't read it, read it. It's a mind-blowing experience, and you will love yourself for reading that. You can see Gabriel Garcia Marquez there on the back. I have the collected stories of Gabriel Garcia Marquez. The General and His Labyrinth. I have the Everyman's Library hardcover of 100 Years of Solitude. That is going to be unhauled at some point. I don't need 2 hardcovers of that. But I've had that Everyman Library for a long time, and I just picked up this. It looks like a first edition, but it's a book club edition, guys. I picked this up in a used bookstore and just got it fairly recently. And then I have Autumn of the Patriarch by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And if you remember, Chronicle of a Death Foretold, I just picked up. It's actually sitting in there in my to-be-read stack. So it'll find its way out on this shelf when I'm done. Then next is Flannery O'Connor, Writing Against God, a collection of essays on Flannery O'Connor's work. I haven't worked through this. I was intrigued because anybody that's I want to see why the title was chosen like that, because anybody that looks like Flannery O'Connor was writing against God might have some work to do on their view of Flannery O'Connor. But it's an easy mistake to make because her characters were very much fighting against the spirit in her work. So, The Habit of Being, this is a collection of letters of Flannery O'Connor. This is a collection of all the letters that we have of her writing back and forth in her life. I have another collection of short stories, A Good Man is Hard to Find. This has a lot of annotations and a lot of information to accompany different stories of Flannery O'Connor, and I've really enjoyed getting into that. It just helped to know where her thoughts come from. This is New Essays on Wise Blood. If you haven't read Wise Blood or the Violent Bear It Away, please do so. My copy of Wise Blood, that is my reading copy. You see, I keep a paperback for reading of things that I love. My mother actually has my copy of Wise Blood. She had just recently read The Violent Bear It Away, and she loved it. And she said, "Well, what else has she read?" I said, "Wise Blood." So she came by and picked it up. So she's gonna read through that one, and then Wise Blood will find its way back over here. And then I have the complete stories of Flannery O'Connor. This is a complete short stories. All the short stories that we have from her in her lifetime. I've worked through 75% of it. I I love Flannery O'Connor, and her amount of work is so small that I think I just don't want to get to the end of it, guys. And I'm sure some of you out there can understand that with authors that you love, that you don't want for it to be over. You know, you want to still have something new to experience from them at some point. And then I have a stand there for what is a very very special book to me. This is a first edition hardcover of The Violent Buried Away by Flannery O'Connor. I was really really lucky to get my hands on this. It was something that I didn't know if I was going to be able to attain a copy until later in my life. You know, when I wasn't worried about money or something like that. So I lucked up, you know, I found it. I told a buddy of mine that I found this just in conversation. He goes, oh, I found it on eBay. He goes, man, make a bid on it. And I said, I'll make a bid on it. I'm not in a position to pay a lot of money right now if it goes beyond what I can pay. But why not try, for what I can. And I did it, and I got it for a ridiculous amount. So I'm down to do artist spotlights or something like that on some of these guys, or anything that's on any of my bookshelves. Artists that I talk about, or even themes. Like the Buddhism bookshelf. Maybe just ramble on about Buddhism. Some different aspects of Buddhism. Whatever people are interested in. Just let me know, guys, and thank you for joining me, BookTube. All right, happy reading.